Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today. And probably one of the most common questions that I get in game, on YouTube, and on the forums, on Discord, pretty much anywhere, tells in game, are when is the next double XP weekend for artifacts? Probably get that asked at least once a day. So now I can finally tell you that it is today. So we got bonus XP artifact from July 14th to July 20th. And the extra feature with this is that not only do you get the double XP when you fortify your artifacts, but the nth metal drops are also double too. So pretty much anything to do with artifacts is doubled. So that is unique to this week, as they usually don't run that twice at the same time. Usually it's one or the other. So what I'll do is, not a lot has changed. I mean, since the last double XP weekend, only 2 new artifacts have come out, and that's the Clarion and Mercy, I believe. I don't think there's any other artifacts that have come out. I may be wrong. I can't remember exactly when the last weekend was. I'd have to go back to my YouTube. But I've updated the slideshows that I'll do. So I'll go through every single artifact in terms of what you need to have for each role, what you can consider, and then what is presently outside of the meta, and then not to worry about. So without further ado, let's get into that. Okay, so taking a look at the artifacts to have for DPS, we'll touch on the Precision DPS first. That's Transformation card, the Strategist card, Eye of the Gemini, and Scrap the Soul Cloak. That is what you should have at rank 200. Your primary loadout would be Transformation, Strategist, and Eye of the Gemini, and then basically be swapping in Strat for Scrap the Soul Cloak when you pop a Supercharge. That is in terms of the DPS meta for Prec DPS. There's going to be other swap artifacts involved as well, but those are your primary 4 that you should focus on having. In terms of Might DPS, Quizlet trumps the Grim now in pretty much 99.9% of situations. So if you're Might DPS, now Quizlet, same thing. That's going to be an artifact you want to have for when you have a supercharge that you can reliably proc it. So for example, any kind of 5,000 supercharge you can be using consistently. I mean, you can still use 10,000, but the 10,000 damage is only single target, where the 5,000 damage is AoE on Quizlet. So that's something, say for example like Electric Might DPS on like an AoE loadout, you'd consistently have the Quizlet damage proccing every time you use the supercharge. Same thing with Rage, and then you'd also have the pet damage from Quizlet proccing each time you have the 1% supercharge regen. It's just a very useful artifact to have. Soul Amplifier is pretty much required for the majority of Might single target abilities. Amulet is also very powerful as well. Dead King Scepter is very powerful for Might. Some people may, it's a swap artifact, you wouldn't run it primarily in your loadout, but it is definitely the artifact you want to have. Or if you have a free spot to level this double XP weekend, because I mean, we've had so many XP weekends, and I know most of you will probably have these artifacts unless you're newer players or we're waiting for a weekend. But Dead King Scepter is very powerful to have, not even for Might DPS, but for Prec as well. And then if you're pet DPS, then Source Shard would be required for DPS. For the tank role, we have Manacles of Force, Mystic Symbol of the Seven, Eye of the Gemini, and Everyman Prototype. Now, it really doesn't matter what tank class you are. These 4 artifacts will cover pretty much every rotation. There's a few that you can consider leveling, which when I get to that slideshow, but for tanking, if you have these 4 artifacts, then you're pretty much covered for all situations. No matter if you switch to Ice, Rage, Earth, Fire, Atomic, doesn't matter. These ones will cover the most general rotations and the most elite raids and cap. Whatever you're doing, these artifacts can be used to substitute. So for healer, for primary pure healing builds, Transformation card, Page of Destiny, and Purple Healing Ray will trump any other combo. And then Eye of the Gemini, just with that, EOG spam meta, you really can't escape that as a healer. So at that point, you're dropping one of them. You're still running like Transformation, Purple Healing Ray, or Gemini. If you're running Elite, you run like Page of Destiny as well as in that one, and run like Page, Purple Healing Ray, Gemini. Or if you're super healer spam, then you'd be running Eye of the Gemini, Scrap, and probably Page of Destiny, Purple Healing Ray at that point. The different combinations depending on the situation, depending if you're solo healing or double healing, but definitely as a healer, you'd want Eye of the Gemini. Consider leveling the Scrap just for those pure EOG builds, but we can't escape that meta. So for controlling, I'll touch on something when I get to the out of meta controlling artifacts, but because really nowadays, I will cover it in a future video, but right now we have a 3rd meta for controlling. So we have power controlling, which was the original meta, then that shifted to the buff controller meta, and now we have the art swap meta for controlling. Now, I understand that it's not realistic or practical for people to be doing that. It's like, you know, the 0.1% of players, because it requires like 8 artifact levels for controlling. So I'll touch on that. So I don't have that as the must-haves, because really it's not expected of you to be able to do that. I mean, so if you want to like max buff or challenge yourself as a controller, then yeah, sure, you can do that. And if you have the money to have every single artifact level, then go for it. But if you're, you know, just a controller, as long as you have Amulet of Rao, that's going to be 100% required for all rotations. And if you have Claw, Tetra, and Cog, then you can swap in Tetra and Cog either or every 12 seconds, have that, swap out the Claw for it. So you're still covered as a buff controller. It's just that you're not worrying about the extra like 4 or 5 artifacts to swap in. So that's the primary build for controlling. So the artifacts to consider leveling for DPS, Pied Piper's Flute is very powerful of an artifact. It's not going to work for every single supercharge. It's primarily used for supercharges that have multiple ticks. Like for example, like with Rage, I've done a video on that. You know, Ice is Blizzard. Where you don't necessarily want to run it is like those large hit artifact, like a large hit supercharges, like say like Big Gun, where Quantum's Oblivion will work because it's multi-hits. It's a very powerful artifact for those 5,000, 10,000 supercharges. So it's one of those things where you should consider leveling it if you've got some spare XP. The Mercy Amatrone Matrix, that is one of the newer artifacts. I still haven't completely covered my builds on that, so it's still kind of TBD for a lot of the stuff. But when you summon a pet, the AoE damage that you get from the Mercy artifact is very strong. So I know some people have tried swapping it before they summon a pet, which works as well, but it is massive damage on that aspect. The other aspects in terms of changing like Fortified Golden Offering to Mercy, you also power your Robot Sidekick to set power interactions and do single target and AoE damage as an extra. So that one's still kind of TBD, but it is still a strong artifact, not only providing pet shields and everything else. So it's one of those things where if you're like a Sorcerer DPS or Pet DPS, that's something you should definitely have as an artifact. If it's something you want to consider leveling a Pet DPS, go for it. If you're an Earth Tank, you can consider that because it does help Brick out. Not that Brick is really end game level, I'd still prefer Aftershocks, but it's one of those artifacts definitely consider. Philosopher's Stone, that's the same thing as the Decking Scepter. That's going to be a swap artifact, but it's still very strong. Since Neovenom Boost is such a prevalent supercharge, think of it when you pop Philosopher's Stone and the Neovenom, the entire duration of Neovenom, you're getting buffed with the Supply Drop when you use Philosopher's Stone. So it's in those situations where you have Neovenom and you're not going to get interrupted in your rotation, Philosopher's Stone really enhances the ability of Neovenom Boost, extending that duration. So consider leveling for controller, same thing. I didn't put anything here because I'll talk about the whole troll swap meta, or kind of briefly cover it when I touch on the out of meta slide. Clarion is something that is very strong for not only DPS, for healing, for tanking. Clarion is a very useful artifact, especially with survival mode coming up. It's more a playstyle preference, that's the thing. Like, it's not necessarily going to, if you're used to like pure healing, it's not necessarily the artifact for you. But if you're you know, kind of DPS centric focused, you know, you run a lot of 4-man alerts without, say, without like even without a healer, without a tank, like the Clarion does really well in 4-man content, just because the shield that you get from Clarion only covers 4 players, but still very useful in elite content. Plenty of players use Clarion. Even some controllers use Clarion just for that extra beneficial shield in Elite Plus. So it is a better art. If you had a choice between the Mercy artifact and Clarion, I would level Clarion. And Refractor, that's an artifact that I use for tanking. Depends on the situation. There's situations where every member, say for example, as Ice. Every member prototype doesn't really work for Ice, and I don't always use a supercharge, so either Gemini would be pointless. So then I run Refractor in those situations. But it's mostly just a tank preference. So artifacts outside the quotation meta. These are artifacts that were prevalent in the past, not so much now. Ones that have to be basically looked at by the developers to improve, because it's just not useful in terms of running content nowadays. So that's Computer's HUD. I tried to make that useful with Atomic. Technically it can work with Gadget's Prec as well. It's a rarely used artifact unless you kind of want to have fun with it. Venomous Dispenser still hasn't recovered from its nerf many years ago. Same thing with Gem of Horus. That was great on test, and as soon as they hit live, it was just pretty much useless. Lamort card I tried to make work. Lamort card is very powerful for rage and rage only. So if you're a rage might DPS and want an artifact to level, then yeah, Lamort card works for you with E-Chain. But other than that, it doesn't work. So controlling, this is the whole art swap meta. So if you want, certainly you can run Bop Comlink, because then you don't have to worry about your CC immunity overlapping and then basically interfering with the tanks. That became prevalent in the last Elite Raid and even in this Elite Raid 2 on ad. So you'll see controls from Bop Comlink. That's more so just because A, it saves your loadout power, so you can run the finisher with Batman to last, because instead of running 3 debuffs, you only have to run 1 with Bop Comlink. And it doesn't CC ads, which is helpful for tanks. Same thing, you'll run Grimbor's Chains. I mean, it's the concept of the trash DPS in hallways on ads. And I mean, I've controller swap in the Rings of Azar now just for the health buff, for the max buff. So I mean, you'll come across videos where the controllers are swapping in like 8, 9 artifacts. That's it. It's not that you're required to do so. I mean, certainly the buffs all stack and help the group, but at the same time, you're also swapping an artifact every single time you do a weapon combo. So I mean, that's even levels that I wouldn't do. But the regular meta is what they fall out of. The 0.01% meta they do fall into, and a Megahedron's always been useless. So for healing, Demon Fang technically works with a Clarion build. If you want to maximize like the Clarion damage build, you can run Demon Fang. I mean, still, I'm not going to spend that much XP unless I have free XP sitting around to level Demon Fang. Same thing, I know healers that swap in Starheart just for the health buff. I mean, that's also overkill. And then Orb is not really as useful. I mean, some healers in the comment section are going to argue that Orb is beneficial. I mean, if you already have Orb, then yeah, don't wreck it and fortify it to another artifact. But I wouldn't, if you don't have Orb leveled, I wouldn't spend the XP to do it. With tanking, Lasso Truth, I mean, if there's going to be situations where Lasso is used to, not glitch, but kind of like cheese the ads, you only need like level 80. You don't need a level 200 Lasso. More so, it's just more inconvenient for the tank to run it. Lazarus Part Water, I mean, you can consider leveling it because we have survival mode coming up, but at the same time, you would never use it outside of survival mode at all. Sparring AI doesn't really work in terms of the immunity duration. Just it sounded great on paper, but it just never works in fruition. And the Cersei's Mask I put there, I tried it as ice. I mean, it's not better than like running Eye of the Gemini, Mystic, Manacles, Everyman, and Refractor. Cersei's Mask would pretty much only work with fire. Ice. It can work technically with fire as well with the self-healing, but pretty much it's only a situation. Say if you have like a dog pile of ads, like a fight with a massive amount of ads, then it's handy because basically when your shields would expire as ice, it would proc the stun and then help you with the healing. So as well with all the ads kind of dogpiling on your shields. So I mean, that unique situation can work, but we rarely have ads, or rarely have raids with that many ads. So we've kind of touched on every single artifact. I know there's going to be plenty of comments in the comment section about what should I levels Earth, what should I levels Fire, what should I levels Rage. So I mean, I'll try to answer as many questions and help those as I can, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people disagreeing necessarily with what I've mentioned in this video, and I welcome those comments as well. So enjoy your double XP weekend, and hope you guys were thankful that you finally have it now. Take care, guys. We'll see you in the next video.